Hell in Pokrovsk, the city is almost surrounded. Zelenskyy demands an urgent withdrawal of troops. Enemy reinforcements. 5,000 soldiers from North Korea have arrived to fight against Ukraine. Snake in the grass. The Russian Ministry of Defense has declared war on Z military bloggers who write about losses. What have we come to? The US has lifted sanctions on Lukashenko. Could it be that the Belarusian dictator has betrayed the Russian? A sensational breakthrough by Ukrainian military engineers. The new development has shocked the entire world. Missile strikes on key Russian thermal power plants. Half the country is without power. Horrifying numbers have been made public. Russia has killed 660 Ukrainian children. Trump is preparing to assassinate Venezuela's leader Maduro. Putin is threatening the entire world with new nuclear missiles. Hello, my name is Katerina Nesterenko, and right now the main news. But first, please like this video and subscribe to our channel so we don't lose each other on YouTube. The Russian army has already captured about 85% of Pokrovsk. This was reported by the publication Bild. They also add that there are no signs of a Ukrainian counteroffensive in the north of the city. In addition, according to the Deep State portal, the Russian army has advanced again in Pokrovsk and in about 3 more villages. The Russians continue to amass forces in Pokrovsk, where they are constantly being monitored and targeted.
Maps of military operations from Ukrainian, foreign, and even some Russian expert publications show that as of November 4th, there is indeed still a salient about 5 to 7 kilometers wide, which is held by Ukrainian forces and prevents anyone from speaking of an encirclement in Pokrovsk.
However, in Ukraine, people have already begun to publicly discuss the urgent need to withdraw troops from the semi-encircled city, while there is still an opportunity to do so. As for the situation in Myrnohrad, it is being reported by the publication Ukrainian Watts.
Myrnohrad has been in operational encirclement for quite some time now. This is being talked about more now because the situation in Pokrovsk has escalated. All routes to Myrnohrad are controlled by the enemy using drones.
According to analysts from the Institute for the Study of War, the enemy is making gains in the Donetsk and Kharkiv regions. Indeed, the situation is tense, and for now, no one even dares to predict what will happen with Pokrovsk. I never cease to admire the courage and heroism of Ukrainian soldiers. They are holding the front and standing up to a huge horde that vastly outnumbers them. That's why I urge you to support the armed forces of Ukraine. And if you can't do it financially, write them words of encouragement in the comments. I know they're watching us. Now this is some news. North Korea has sent another 5,000 soldiers to Russia. This was reported by the South Korean agency Yonhap, citing the Parliamentary Intelligence Committee.
According to lawmaker Lee Sung-kwon, about 5,000 North Korean military construction workers have been gradually transferred to Russia since September and are expected to be involved in infrastructure reconstruction.
According to the lawmaker, Seoul is also observing ongoing signs of training and selection of personnel, as well as preparations for further troop deployments to Russia. According to South Korean intelligence, there are currently about 10,000 North Korean military personnel near the Russian-Ukrainian border. Additionally, around 1,000 North Korean sappers are engaged in demining operations. As is known, in exchange for sending troops, North Korea receives financial aid, military technology, food, and energy resources from Russia, allowing Pyongyang to avoid the consequences of international sanctions imposed for its nuclear and missile programs. What do you think about this mutually beneficial friendship between North Korea and the Russian Federation? Write your thoughts, don't hold back in the comments. And now, attention, listen closely to these numbers. On territory controlled by Ukraine alone, more than 660 children have been killed and over 2,000 have been wounded. And these are only the confirmed cases. This grim statistic of children killed and wounded as a result of Russian aggression was announced by the head of the president's office, Andriy Yermak, who called on the world to hold Russia accountable. Yermak wrote about this in his article for the American publication The Washington Examiner.
I write not only as an official but also as a witness to systematic evil. Russia's war against Ukraine is a war against children, a deliberate, ruthless attack on the most vulnerable. The numbers are staggering.
According to Yermak, thousands of children have been taken to Russia in order to erase their Ukrainian identity. They are brainwashed, prepared for war, and turned into tools of the Russian Empire. Moreover, the exact number of child casualties in the occupied territories remains unknown.
The treatment of children is the most horrifying evidence of Russia's moral bankruptcy. Remember Philip, a 17-year-old boy who was forcibly taken to Russia. He was adopted by Maria Lvova-Belova, Vladimir Putin's Commissioner for Children's Rights, who is under an international arrest warrant. According to her own words, she had to re-educate Philip because he sang Ukrainian songs and refused to give up his identity. This is genocide, not collateral damage. This is a deliberate strategy to destroy the heart and soul of a nation.
Ukraine continues its efforts to bring the children back. 1,744 children have already been returned from Russia. In his article, Yermak called on the international community to take concrete action, strengthen sanctions, and provide military support to Ukraine, and also urged that Russia be recognized as a terrorist state. Like this video if you share this position. Reading the comments under previous episodes, I see that many of our viewers are from Kazakhstan, Moldova, Europe, and even the USA. We, Ukrainians, are very grateful to you for your support and proud to have such reasonable viewers. Let us know in the comments under this episode which country you're watching us from. And does your country support our fight against the empire of evil? I always enjoy reading your comments. And now let's continue. Up next is the most interesting part. The US Department of the Treasury has announced a partial easing of sanctions against Belarus. In particular, restrictions on the national airline Belavia have been lifted, and operations involving President Alexander Lukashenko's plane have been permitted. This was reported by Reuters. It is noted that this step is part of a gradual warming of relations between the US and Belarus. As Reuters reports, in September, following a call from US President Donald Trump, Belarus released 52 prisoners. In response, Washington promised to ease sanctions, including for Belavia, which will help the company maintain and purchase spare parts for its aircraft.
On Tuesday, the Office of Foreign Assets Control of the Treasury Department officially lifted sanctions from Belavia and an aircraft operated by the airline, which had previously been considered used by high-ranking officials and members of Lukashenko's family. A general license was also issued, allowing certain transactions related to the use of 3 of Lukashenko's aircraft that had previously been under sanctions. According to previous statements from the Treasury Department, the license includes a Boeing 737 owned by the Belarusian government and used as the presidential aircraft, as well as another plane that was part of the presidential fleet.
However, the restrictions imposed in 2020 due to election fraud in Belarus and support for Moscow in the war against Ukraine remain in force. Sanctions against Lukashenko himself and his family have not yet been lifted. And now the most interesting part? Reuters reports that recently, the Donald Trump administration has strengthened its contacts with Minsk and even sent delegations there. What do you think is behind this rapprochement? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll definitely read them. The administration of US President Trump developed military scenarios for overthrowing Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro, which included airstrikes and special forces operations to capture or eliminate him. Although Trump has not yet made a final decision, his key advisors are pushing for a forceful scenario, and the Department of Justice is working on creating a legal justification that would allow them to act without congressional approval. The New York Times reports this, citing numerous American officials. According to the publication, the main supporters of military intervention are Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller. Trump himself is still hesitating, fearing that the operation could fail and turn into an embarrassing defeat. However, his main motivation and the subject of constant questions to his advisors is the potential benefit for the United States, particularly gaining control over Venezuela's vast oil reserves, which are the largest in the world. The New York Times writes that preparations for a possible operation are already underway. Since the end of August, the United States has been steadily increasing its military presence in the Caribbean. There are already about 10,000 American military personnel in the region. It is expected that in the middle of the month, the newest and largest U.S. aircraft carrier will arrive there with 5,000 sailors on board, and it will carry more than 75 aircraft. Trump will likely make his final decision after the arrival of the aircraft carrier. Right now, there are 3 main military action options on Trump's desk.
The first option involves carrying out airstrikes on military targets and Maduro-loyal units in order to provoke him to flee and make him vulnerable to capture. The second, more risky option, involves deploying elite special forces units such as Delta Force, one of the most secretive Tier 1 units of the U.S. Armed Forces Special Operations, or an elite Navy SEAL team for the direct capture or elimination of Maduro. The most complex and large-scale plan envisions the landing of American special forces with the goal of taking control of airfields, oil fields, and other critical infrastructure in the country.
What do you think about this whole story? Do you think this is just a journalist's invention or not? Meanwhile, in Russia, everything is as stable as ever. The dictator of all Russia, Putin, once again boasted about the development of nuclear weapons and is trying to scare the West. Thus, at the award ceremony for the developers of the Burevestnik and Poseidon missiles, Putin stated that only domestic materials are used in these missiles.
During the official testing of the Burevestnik missile system on October 21st, a NATO reconnaissance ship was constantly present in the area. We did not interfere with its work. Let them watch if they want to.
At the same time, according to Putin, a new generation of weapons is already being developed based on the same nuclear installation as the Burevestnik. He says these technologies will help build a station on the moon.
We have created, put on duty, and begun serial production of the Oreshnik medium-range missile system. We have equipped our intercontinental ballistic missiles and submarine-launched missiles with modern systems for overcoming missile defense. And this year, we will put the system with the heavy intercontinental missile Sarmat on experimental combat duty. And next year, it will be on full combat duty. Finally, Russia is also acquiring the Burevestnik cruise missile with unlimited range and the Poseidon unmanned underwater vehicle with nuclear power units. Our country does not threaten anyone. Like all other nuclear powers, Russia is actively continuing to develop its nuclear potential, developing its strategic capabilities.
Personally, I am not surprised. If there's nothing else to boast about, Putin always brings up nuclear weapons.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
While Putin is boasting about nuclear weapons, Russia is experiencing yet another attack by Ukrainian drones. For several nights in a row now, good drones have been reaching exactly where they need to go. For example, last night something exploded violently near the thermal power plant in Oriol. After Oriol, the drones also visited the Vladimir region. One of the most powerful substations in the Russian Federation is located there. It holds enormous strategic and technical significance for the Russian energy system. I hope every night will be like this for them. Do you feel the same? Then give this video a like. Let's see how many of us there are. Ukrainian Armed Forces airstrikes on Russian military and energy targets are becoming more frequent, farther-reaching, and more effective. Russian infrastructure, and with the latest Akim plant in Bashkortostan and the oil refinery in Novgorod region. Next, about aerial tactics. The Ukrainian Armed Forces on the eve of winter. Why are they so successful?
Military facilities, energy, and the oil industry. The war has finally shifted onto Russian territory, and it seems the Ukrainian armed forces have settled on their targets in the occupiers' rear and are increasing their long-range strikes.
One of the main goals is to force Russia to end the war. The idea is to make the cost of this war higher for Russia so that there is more motivation to end it.
At the same time, the defense forces are giving Russians more motivation every day. Over the past few weeks, not a single night has passed in Russia without something exploding, catching fire, or being destroyed. We've gathered the most high-profile incidents. Undoubtedly, the most striking event in terms of Russian blackouts was the Ukrainian Armed Forces attack on the Moscow region on the night of November 1st. Monitoring channels reported hundreds of drones that flew out to bomb Russia, and they hit their targets. Even though Moscow's power grid held up, entire settlements around the capital were left without electricity. In particular, the Moscow region and the city of Zhukovsky were left in the dark.
The armed forces of Ukraine have already carried out numerous strikes on stations and substations, and electricity and heating are periodically cut off in many cities across Russia and in the occupied territories. Let me remind you, Ukraine is conducting a campaign against Russian energy infrastructure in response to Russia's terror attacks on Ukraine's power-generating facilities. I believe that in December, this retaliatory campaign will reach a new level with the use of Flamingo missiles almost on a daily basis.
The campaign to destroy Russia's oil industry is also ongoing. In particular, recent strikes on the Russian oil terminal in Tuapse have been especially effective.
The attack on the Tuapse seaport was quite large-scale and effective, as well as spectacular. Local residents began taking photos and recording videos of the attack. The beginning of this attack was also captured on video. Meanwhile, local emergency services issued their usual statements, asking people not to film the aftermath of the strikes. This helps the enemy.
However, what helps the Ukrainian armed forces is not the videos made by concerned Russians who, in the fourth year of the war, have suddenly discovered that it is happening right outside their windows, but rather intelligence data, including from the West, which makes such precise strikes possible.
As a result of the strike, according to the Russian side's own assessment, Ukrainian UAVs hit, respectively, such targets as the central overpass, which is the main hub for oil transfer operations. And accordingly, we're talking about a strike on an oil tanker, which at the moment of the attack was being loaded.
At the same time, when possible, the Ukrainian armed forces managed to kill several birds with one stone with a single strike. That is, on the one hand, they destroy an enterprise that is extremely important to the Russian economy, and on the other, they hit openly military targets.
The strike was carried out on an industrial giant of the Stavropol region, the Stavrolan petrochemical plant in the city of Budyonnovsk. This is one of the largest producers of polyethylene, polypropylene, benzene, and other petrochemical components that are actively used in the military-industrial complex.
Analysts note that a strike was carried out there for the first time. By the way, the plant is located 700 kilometers from Ukraine, and the enterprise supplies raw materials both to the domestic market and for export. This means that the attack damages not only the military-industrial complex, but also Russia's export revenues. Defense forces are also operating against targets of the Russian Federation in the occupied territories. A few days ago, the residents of Crimea especially felt this after one of the largest attacks on the peninsula in recent months, particularly targeting oil depots in Hvardiivka and Sevastopol.
The outcome of this episode is as follows. In just 1 hour, 2 major oil facilities in Crimea were put out of operation. This means a complete loss of logistical stability for the occupiers' rear supply in this sector, especially against the backdrop of the destruction and disabling of the largest oil terminal in Feodosia and the general gasoline shortage in Russia itself, which, I remind you, is the only source of resupplying Crimea's oil depots.
Most recently, on the night of November 4th, drones as well as Storm Shadow missiles from the defense forces managed to inflict damage, both on Russian energy infrastructure and oil depots, and also significantly complicated their presence in the occupied territories, effectively shutting down all
The military, the armed military forces, the armed forces. Facilities. On the territory of the Russian Federation over the past day, Ukrainian defense forces have carried out drone strikes. In the Kursk region, this was in Zeleznogorsk, targeting a substation. The city is completely without power. In the Lipetsk region, it was the PS Usman traction substation, and accordingly, the city of Orel. A strike was carried out on the Orel CHP, combined heat and power plant. That's regarding.
As for the military facilities, analysts call one of the most successful long-range attacks by the Ukrainian Armed Forces the explosions at the dam near Belgorod. The strike was so precise that no civilians were harmed. However, Russian units in the Kharkiv region were cut off from their own forces due to the flooding, and their offensive failed.
An important goal is to strike at Russia's logistical capabilities, to target ammunition depots, airfields, aircraft, and troop concentrations in order to create difficulties for Moscow's war machine. To strike at the centers from which Russia directs operations at the front and from which it can attack Ukraine's strategic infrastructure, including its energy sector.
At the same time, it's far too early for Russians to relax, as announced by the head of the drone systems forces, Madyar. This winter, Russian citizens will find out what a blackout is, and he also reminded them about gas and oil. They burn very well, obviously hinting at new attacks on oil refineries.
As of November, according to estimates from the Russian side itself, about 40% of oil refineries on the territory of the Russian Federation have already been put out of operation.
Well, as they say, as the saying goes, to be continued.
And yet another scandal is brewing in Russia. The enemy Telegram channel Inside Azov was accused by their own people. They claim that it publishes blatant lies meant to discredit the Russian army. They claim that the list of dead and missing Russian soldiers they have is fake. And the stories about them are just as fake. The scandal was brought to attention by the YouTube channel Votshto and its author, blogger Artyom Sheinin. Listen for yourself.
Here, it's just some Z-boys writing. Supposed fighters for a just cause and freedom, everyone and everything, that's the insider's Telegram channel. They keep publishing fake news in an attempt to discredit the command of the 25th Army.
For their part, the Insider Zov Telegram channel insists they are right. They claim that everything they publish is true. They claim that the losses in the Russian army are colossal. In
the post, it is stated that I am making up stories. Well, what can I say, dear relatives, to those who asked me to show the post? According to the channel admin, who also happens to be the command of the 25th Army, you don't exist. Or you're just a fake, a product of my imagination. Respect to the families of those who went to defend the homeland. Judge for yourselves. Guys, you don't exist either. I made it all up myself. Turns out I'm quite the writer. And the most interesting thing is that I come up with stories in my head that you believe not because you or your loved ones are actually living through this special military operation, but simply because you're stupid, sorry for being blunt, at least according to the command of the 25th Army, and you're not able to see everything with your own eyes. Moving on. The post says that the massive losses in the 25th Army are nonsense. Well, what can I say? Let's stick to the facts instead of just blatantly lying.
To back up his words, Insider Zov publishes huge lists.
Let's talk about the most important thing right now, the lives of the soldiers, the losses in the 25th Army, which, as they claim, is nonsense, that the losses are massive. We spent a very long time compiling this list. It already contains more than 3,000 names of those who have been officially declared dead by the army and given the status of killed in action. These are only those who were supposed to be sent back to their families, and importantly, some have already been buried without their relatives knowing, which could mean that the soldiers were sent by mistake or simply written off. Simply to those who are waiting without really looking into whether there was a DNA match or not and so on. Now showing all 3,000 plus names from the list is practically impossible. It would take a lot of time. But so as not to be like the author of the channel in the screenshot, a braggart, I will still show a few hundred. I repeat, this is only for a period of a year and a half, and this does not include the losses for 2025.
Yes, you heard that right. Insider Zoof writes that these are lists from those more than 3,000 who were acknowledged by the army, and this is over a year and a half, only those who are known, not including 2025. When the losses only increased, those who were acknowledged but not evacuated, not including the wounded who will not return to service.
You, respected commander of the 25th Army, Major General Rustam Avudovich Yusupov, if you are still in command there, instead of realizing that everything is coming to light and nothing can be hidden, should try to understand what problems you have in the army, who is making decisions on the ground, and what decisions they are making. You decided to blatantly and shamelessly lie and pretend that nothing is happening, shift the responsibility onto others, and create the illusion that everything is fine. Is that why the 25th Army was created in 2023 to destroy your own soldiers? Yes, with losses like these, you couldn't win any war.
Well, what can I say? Truth and Russia are two different things. You can't tell the truth to outsiders or your own people, especially if it's numbers, names, lists, long lists of those whom Russia itself dragged into this war. Like if you agree, Russian intelligence agencies have become more active in Poland, trying to stir up anti-Ukrainian sentiment across the country. The main message of this Kremlin campaign is as follows. For Poles, Ukraine is worse than Russia. And unfortunately, this FSB operation is already bearing its anti-Ukrainian fruit.
The number of attacks and crimes committed by Poles against Ukrainian citizens has sharply increased over the past year. Ukrainians are being attacked in the streets with shouts of "Go back home" and "Go to the front." They even insult children.
In fact, it's outright humiliation, let's be honest. And this is happening at school. They would fall to the floor shouting, "Missile, get down!" And of course they laughed because that's a very funny joke, so to speak.
The wave of aggression stands in stark contrast to the atmosphere of solidarity that prevailed just 3 years ago, when Poland opened its borders to millions of Ukrainian refugees.
For example, now it's become very difficult to find housing because we have a lot of refugees from Ukraine, and now it really has become hard to look for an apartment. There aren't enough jobs.
The number of robberies in Poland in which Ukrainians become victims has increased by 57%. There has been an increase in cases of harassment, identity theft, coercion, and blackmail.
It has happened more than once that when someone hears us speaking our language, they immediately react aggressively. And this happens on trams, in stores, and in other public places. One time a man just insulted me at the bus stop for no reason at all. I was told that I was a freeloader and should go home.
In 2024 alone, Ukrainians contributed more than 18 billion zlotys to Poland's budget. Almost 1 million people are using temporary protection. Experts also talk about disinformation in which the Kremlin is involved.
The publication notes that Ukrainians are being beaten and humiliated more often.
A Banderite test has appeared at the Ukrainian-Polish border.
Polish chauvinists hate Ukrainians and the Ukrainian language.
Mikola, it's time to work. In Poland, unemployed Ukrainians have been stripped of social benefits. And
also, negativity among Poles is spreading due to the economic crisis and political manipulation.
People are afraid that Ukrainians are taking their place in line, at the doctor's office, in kindergartens, or in the job market. In
social networks, fake stories with Russian disinformation are spreading, for example, about so-called entitled Ukrainians who refuse to pay for services. We
live in a time when social networks function as digital gossip.
According to Polish law enforcement, from the beginning of the year until July 2025, 543 hate-motivated incidents have been recorded. The most common crimes against Ukrainians are threats of criminal acts. If in 2022 there were 317 such cases, then in 2024 there were already 479. It is worth noting that hate crimes are a form of discrimination and a violation of human rights. Why are Poles looking for betrayal among Ukrainians when the enemy has already infiltrated from within? Kremlin bot farms operate online, while spies are active directly within the country. Recently, in a Polish city, a married couple was detained who had been in contact with representatives of the Russian FSB, following a scheme to receive a package containing powerful explosives via a courier service. A suspected courier for Russian intelligence has been detained in Poland. Russia was preparing terrorist attacks in Europe using drones and cans filled with powerful explosives attached to the UAVs. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk stated that 8 people have already been detained. They are suspected of preparing acts of sabotage.
The case is currently under investigation. Additional operational measures are being carried out. In
the country, Russia is not openly accused, nor are the details of the planned acts of sabotage or those behind them disclosed. At the same time, the country is preparing for a possible war between the Russian Federation and the countries of the North Atlantic Alliance, which could begin as early as 2027.
Our intelligence services point to such a possible scenario. NATO commanders are talking about this, as are we ourselves. We are doing this to send a clear signal to Russia and China. We know about their plans and want to prevent them.
European countries have already repeatedly encountered unidentified UAVs on their territory. Such drones monitor airports and bases. For example, during international exercises in Poland, Dutch military personnel saw UAVs when they set up camp at an airfield.
They keep coming up with new scare stories. Look, in Poland, drones have shown up. Where did they come from? They came to Ukraine.
The detection of Russian drones on Polish territory led to a doubling of the number of Poles willing to voluntarily mobilize at the outbreak of war. But that number is still insufficient. Only 39% of Poles support the reinstatement of mandatory military conscription. Supporters are mainly fans of the Polish government and people over 70 years old, especially those living in rural areas. At the same time, opponents are mostly women, young people under 30, and residents of large cities with higher education. Despite the threat from the north, Poles fall for Russian provocations and do not fully trust their own government. This could backfire on them and help weaken Poland, which is exactly what the Kremlin wants. Ukrainian
engineers have created an analog of the Chinese Mavics, which are in high demand at the front. And this is just one of the new products from the domestic defense industry, which is producing them at lightning speed. We will tell you about the latest and most effective developments by Ukrainian military engineers.
Reconnaissance, fire adjustment, striking targets by dropping munitions. The Chinese Mavic drone is almost the main weapon of the Ukrainian Armed Forces in the war against the occupier. And now Ukrainian industry has begun supplying domestically produced Mavic-type UAVs to the front lines.
A certain Mr. X invested, created a Ukrainian Mavic, and we will see it soon. We've already delivered the first 1,000 to the battlefield.
Compared to the Chinese Mavic, the Ukrainian counterpart has a greater flight range and can carry a larger payload. It is used not only for reconnaissance, but also for strike missions. The importance of Ukrainian drones appearing in this niche can hardly be overstated, since there are huge problems with the supply of Mavics to Ukraine.
DJI has banned sales to Ukraine, piously stating that its products are not intended for military purposes, so drones have to be purchased from third parties. The security issues are obvious. The Pentagon has banned any use of DJI drones, which send data back to the manufacturer. DJI has also added security features that make it impossible for the latest models to fly in geo-blocked zones, including Ukraine, without extensive hacking. Finally, sovereign drone manufacturing appears to be a key strategic capability for the future.
The Chinese drone Mavic's counterpart is called Shmavik, and despite the ironic name, it has already been certified and boasts some serious features.
Shmavik is positioned as a tactical reconnaissance drone designed to carry out operational tasks on the front lines, unlike the civilian Mavic, which is mainly used for aerial photography and videography. Shmavik is built for combat conditions. It has an operational range of up to 15 kilometers, a flight duration of up to 60 minutes, and is equipped with a reliable navigation system that is resistant to interference.
As early as last year, the government announced its interest in replacing Chinese drones. Now, manufacturers have already certified Ukrainian Mavics and set up production. As of today, it is impossible to completely replace the entire fleet of imported drones currently being used in Ukraine in the short term. Our weapons manufacturers already have developments and designs in place that meet the needs of our security and defense forces. Now it is necessary to scale up this production, minimize the number of foreign equivalents as much as possible, and switch to domestic models. There are already many Ukrainian analogs of the Mavic, including Ukraporta, Yaitia, and the charming Shmavik. They are larger than DJI Mavic drones and are equipped with long-range communication. They are resistant to interference and cost more, but they may turn out to be more economical due to their greater reliability.
For us, the key indicator is not the price per drone, but the cost of a single mission. While a typical Mavic performs about 60 missions per drone, our systems average around 300 missions per unit. With a comparable purchase price, the cost per mission is 5 times lower. This means that military units operating our drones receive a much greater overall economic benefit. Drone manufacturer.
Independent UAV production is a crucial element of modern warfare, and Ukraine knows this better than anyone. Because short-range UAVs and long-range strike drones have become key components of national defense.
Meme of the day. The password for the Louvre's video surveillance system was Louvre. This is a continuation of the story about the high-profile robbery in Paris that the whole world was following. Confidential documents reviewed by the French newspaper Libération reveal a long history of security vulnerabilities at the Louvre. The publication reports that museum security guards were using software purchased back in 2003, which has long since been unsupported by the developer. At the same time, the passwords consisted of a single simple word. One of them is the Louvre. At present, the police believe that 4 people were involved in the latest robbery at the Louvre. 3 suspects have already been detained. 2 allegedly stole the jewels, while another waited for his friends at the museum exit with a scooter. The jewelry has still not been found. Let me remind you, the robbers took 8 precious jewelry items, including a sapphire tiara, a necklace, and an earring to match. An emerald necklace, and matching earrings, as well as a tiara and a brooch that belonged to Empress Eugénie, the wife of Napoleon III. There was also a 9th item, which the police managed to recover, the crown, which contains more than 2,000 diamonds and 56 emeralds. What do you think about this whole robbery story? Do you think it was a planned operation involving someone from the staff? Or was it just a coincidence due to the guards' negligence? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll definitely read them. How do you like our news? Let us know what we should change to become better. We will definitely take it into account. In the meantime, give this video a like to support what we do, and be sure to subscribe to our channel, Ukraine Today, so you don't miss the next episodes. See you.